Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Oscar Riebling, Education Manager at The Wolf. We're excited to welcome here tonight to Into the Stacks, live from Collection Storage. In the program first, we'll actually be streaming from our fourth floor object storage area. And so we're very excited to be bringing you this exclusive program that typically would only be reserved for a smaller audience. I'm pleased to introduce Nathaniel Sandler of Bookleggers Library fame, in addition to his Crypt Cracking project, which is really where this program is born out of. And so in really being true to the spirit of Into the Stacks, we'll literally be delving into a series of objects and different selections from the collection that we don't often really have a chance to explore. This was a big team effort, and so I do want to commend the work of all my colleagues in getting this program together. We're joined as well by Isabel Bredor, who will be in conversation with Nathaniel and again, giving us a little bit more insight into what we're looking at. This is a program first. Hello, Isabel. And so there are spaces that aren't necessarily configured for optimal Wi-Fi, and so in case there is a bit of a lapse, we're all here to kind of just really give you this behind the scenes access. If there are any questions about any specific objects, we'll do our very best to kind of answer those. But again, this is kind of more of a general survey and some highlights that Nathaniel and Isabel would like to kind of touch upon. I encourage everyone to use the chat feature, the Q&A as appropriate during the program, if there's anything you'd like us to kind of direct our attention towards. And at the end, after the 45-minute segment, we'll segue into the more formal Q&A segment. But again, feel free to present your questions as we kind of progress through the program. I'm joined by my colleague, John, a mogul himself, who will be actually the camera operator and giving us this insight. And so, John, are you ready? Are we ready to see what's going on there? Let's see.
Are we good? Oscar, can you hear me?
Nathaniel Javaris as well, our colleague from security. Yes, please, welcome. Take us away.
Okay, so my name is Nathaniel Sandler. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Oscar. I am the founding director of Bookleggers Library here, which serves up Miami with free books as often as we can. And my Knight Foundation funded project Crypt Cracking is what brings me here today. And we take you into the stacks. This program is going on for years now at the Wolfsonian. And actually, when the COVID pandemic hit in March, John and others reached out to me, Oscar, and said, what can you do here during the pandemic? What can you do digitally? I said, let's go actually into the stacks. So finally, after much hustle and work on behalf of the Wolfsonian staff here, who works very hard and gets a lot of wonderful things done, we are finally going into the stacks. And so I sit here in front of this massive steel door because we did want to impress upon you the idea of safety. And this is a fire door that is period to the building, 1920s, by a company, Berg-Lloyd, that was famous for steel, steel lockers, steel cabinets, that kind of stuff. And this is a fire door, so if there was a fire, it would have been shut to hopefully save parts of the building, which was, of course, used in the 1920s for storage for incredibly rich people in the city of Miami. And now I'd like to introduce Javaris. Javaris, tell us about yourself. Speak to the people that are watching the Wolfsonian on their computers.
My name is Javaris Jones. I'm an AV Tech Senior Security here at the Wolfsonian, and I will be the freight elevator conductor for you guys tonight.
Okay, so we are going to go into the elevator. The first behind-the-scenes tour is the freight elevator. Of course, the elevator is period and was built by the Warner Elevator Company in the 1920s. You can see everything is as it was back then. And this piece itself was built, you can see the date behind the cut on the floor, was built to hold 10,000 pounds so that people could put their cars into the elevator and move it up. Unfortunately, it's dark, so you can't see how high up it goes, but it does go several stories up and moves quite slow, and there's a lot of heavy objects that move into this elevator. And Javaris, what kind of stuff do you see come in and out of here?
The biggest thing I've seen come in here was the Rolls Royce Phantom when the one we had for our bathroom, and we put it in here and we put it on the second floor. That's the biggest vehicle I've seen today.
So Rolls-Royce Phantom. So the two most important passengers we've had so far, the Rolls-Royce Phantom and myself, correct?
Correct.
So this elevator was built in the 20s. In addition, the 2 more floors were added in the 30s, and then I believe in the 90s there was another floor or 2 added. The engine is all the way up on the 8th floor, completely inaccessible to most people. I've seen it before, and it is beautiful. It's massive. I would like to do an Into the Stacks where everybody gets into this elevator and goes to see the machine that actually operates it. I don't know, John. Maybe one day we'll do that.
Maybe one day.
But it does let out, and you can see all of these objects back here now are museum objects. There are pieces and frames, and what do they call these things?
Pedestals.
Pedestals. That's what it is. That are being used for the work of the museum, and that's what we're trying to do today. It's really quite an industrial thing. Is we're trying to show you the work of the museum. We're trying to show you the back of the museum. Thank you, Javaris. And so in the back of the museum, we come across Amy.
Hi.
Amy, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amy. I am assistant registrar at the Wilsonian, and I am one of the team who gets to take direct care of the collection, which can mean the proper storage of the collection, knowing the location of the objects, but also working with the database, among other things.
And Amy for years now has tried her best to not say anything during Into the Stacks, but every single time I try to encourage her, and we would like to say hello to her parents who are watching today. Go on, say hello. All right, and we're gonna say goodbye to Javaris. Thank you so much, Javaris. We really appreciate the ride. So here we are, Into the Stacks. Finally, Into the Stacks has actually gotten into the stacks. And this is so cool to be able to take you here in some small way, even if it's over Zoom. And they don't let that many people in here. It took quite some time for them to even let me in here. And it's taken a lot longer to let the general public in here, but I don't think there's much video or anything. This is really kind of a first for the Wolfsonian. And so you can see that some of the objects are sort of splayed out. There's many rows, and we're gonna sort of take you in. But when we first started visualizing this, this piece right here was right when you got out of the elevator, and I said, leave it. And because you look at the back here, and honestly, unless you're a certain kind of person, it's pretty hard to tell what that object is. Does anybody have any idea? There's a bunch of tubes, a bunch of bands, and for me, I wouldn't have had any clue until walking around to the other side. And you can see it is really a beautiful, beautiful radio, which of course the Wolfsonian is known for. It's one-of-a-kind radio collection. The piece itself is from the 1930s, 1933 specifically, and we know this because there's advertisements that we can pinpoint this exact piece to September of 1933. But I wanted to keep it here because what we just did, showing you the back and then showing you the front, is really the point of Into the Stacks, where you get to see both sides of how this works. And it's going to end up being a sort of metaphor for what we're doing tonight and the museum itself. And you know, we wanted to point this out because it's shaped like a skyscraper, much like the building itself. John, you know, remember this. Remember, we're not experts at this stuff here. We are experts at objects, and it's 8 floors, just like the museum here, although there is some contention on that. The museum goes to 7, there is an 8th floor. Remember where the top of the elevator is. And it's a wooden piece. It's a traditional wooden piece, but it's in that highly streamlined style, much like a skyscraper. And at the time, in 1933, radios were changing all the time. The companies were trying to make a newer, a sexier, a better radio, even though the technology was still just radio. The technology wasn't getting better. It was just about making it a sleeker piece. And it was about keeping up with the Joneses at the time. And actually the price, do you know the answer to this, Amy? I know what the answer is. What do you think the thing cost? Ballpark. Come on, yes.
John's cheating. 55.
Nope, it was $86.50 for that piece. Beautiful, beautiful. It's like the price is right here. Of course, the one metaphor that we do not want to extend from the radio is that while the company that made this radio, the Majestic, it was built in 1933. It went out of business in 1934, and that is where the metaphor will stop. So now we're going to pan around. You can see some of these objects in their places and some of what they're up to and how they live, where they sit. And Isabel, who is a collections expert, will tell us a little bit about how these objects arrange, not themselves, but how the people arrange them and why.
Thanks, Nathaniel. So I'm the digital asset manager here at the Wolf, but I'm also versed in collections management and collections care. So what you're seeing here, we currently have about 200,000 objects altogether, but our fourth floor storage has a small sampling of those. What you're mainly seeing are ceramics, decorative arts. You do see some furniture. There's a beautiful lighting fixture. And in addition to a storage space, this is also a staging area for exhibitions, incoming and outgoing loans. And what's fascinating about this is kind of like that front of house, back of house metaphor. Just as our front of house has evolved, our back of house has evolved. So currently, all of these objects are stored according to medium. So you'll see ceramics stored with ceramics, glass stored with glass. And this isn't only just for safety, but also all of these objects are held in perpetuity for future generations. So they're all going to decompose at different rates. And you want things stored together because they'll have the same gases being released. So you won't have something being off-gassing that can damage potentially the object next to it. It's sort of similar to that idea of one bad apple ruins the bunch, right? Or like rotting fruit will rot others, but not quite in that compressed time frame. You'll also see here, storage is super important, which is another reason why they're stored together. So these are silver pieces that are stored in bags. And you can just imagine for safety purposes, you wouldn't want like a small medallion or something else maybe hiding behind the bag. You kind of know what to expect for moving purposes. Also, what's interesting is we haven't always stored things this way. So in a previous time, earlier on in the museum's history, we actually stored things based on geographic origin. So you would have all of the things from the collection from Germany in one bay or one group of shelves. You'd have France in another. And from a curatorial perspective, this makes excellent sense, right? You're able to come in and kind of survey what you have. But from a collection standpoint, not so much, just for the reasons I mentioned. So museums in the last 50 to 60 years have undergone what in the field is called a paradigm shift. So as they've become increasingly more professionalized and standardized, you do have these changes happening, which is amazing. And if you look a little closer here at these ceramics, you'll see there are tags. So again, you're always thinking about perpetuity and preservation. These tags are actually made from material that won't deteriorate or off-gas as quickly, or yellow just like regular paper. And you'll see that they have their name of the object, if there's a title or a maker, as well as most importantly, the object number. So think of the object number or the accession number as sort of the social security number of a piece. It's how we find it in a database. It's how we find any previous research that's been done or any records. And research will kind of come into things as we move forward. So I'll hand it back to Nathaniel, that I think is what
I'd like to say that the idea of you guys as stewards of collections, and it's a concept that's very meaningful to me with respect to museums. I think it's important that people look after these things and generationally, and of course that's why stealing from a museum is the worst thing that you can do, because you're stealing from a future generation. But that concept of all of these objects eventually degrading is super existential to me, and you've depressed me, Isabel. Thank you for that.
You know, registrars are downers, and that's kind of what we do. We tell people no. We tell people absolutely not, and sometimes we say maybe.
That's right. Well, then the no, the absolutely not, by the way, is the impulse to touch objects. And whenever you're in one of these rooms, everybody's like, oh, I want to touch that. I want to touch that. I want to touch that. But that is the biggest no-no. Of course, certain people are allowed to touch it, like Amy, for instance.
But only with the green gloves.
And so you can see she has green gloves. And over here, this was a project that was being worked on just yesterday. And we kept it out because it was so interesting to see. This is the frame for the object that is now put away in this sort of acid-free environment. And that box itself was incredibly detailed in terms of how it was cut. And maybe, Amy, you could speak a little bit to how that process goes. I mean, I know it's...
I mean, this is all archival and non-acid material. And going to what Isabel was saying about proper storage, most times we would wrap such works on paper or things like this in paper to protect it. But in this case, it's a pastel, and you don't want to have anything directly in direct contact with the piece, since it could rub off on that protection.
So it came out of this frame, and then the frame gets wrapped. Of course, you can see it came from this rack right here. And there's a hole, and its partner in artistic crime is right here. So the piece goes through all of these various safety measures to go back into its place in this painting vault here. So we're gonna move into another row here where we're gonna show you guys some new stuff that just came in, because that is a big part of a museum process. Stuff comes in. I mean, there are the number, Isabel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is 185,000 objects. Is that right?
200,000 actually. We are growing at a crazy rate. And
that is a crazy rate. So we're at 200,000, and down this row, in between the typewriters and mannequin heads, is some new additions, but also some materials that are here for conservation. And it's a bunch of weird chemicals. Certainly you would not want to drink, probably, or touch any of these. We had a good laugh about that before, but Isabel, can you tell us what some of these weird juices might be for?
so it's not the kind of alcohol you want to drink. One of the things to keep in mind is that museums, one of the main goals is preservation and conservation, not restoration. So this area is a staging area as well as storage, and we do have some conservation work that happens here. Whenever we accession something, be it through a donation or be it through a purchase, one of the key concerns, along with provenance, and we can get into that a little later, is one, can we safely care for it? Two, if it does need to be stabilized, can we do that? And then three, if we were to exhibit it, is it in a state that we can, it's stable enough to do so, or would we need to have a conservator use those tools to do that? And we do have some conservation work that happens in-house. We also do send stuff out as needed basis, but whenever in doubt, we're always in contact with different professionals. And that's one of the great things that's been happening in the last 50, 60 years, especially now with technology. More and more registrars are speaking with one another. We have professional organizations. So there's lots of resources to just reach out and ask. And John's kind of panning into some of our bigger objects now. We keep mentioning the number 200,000. I just want to mention, we don't have 200,000 objects in this storage facility right now. The bulk of our collection is actually stored offsite at our annex. And there you'll see our larger items like furniture, larger appliances and machines, as well as all of our works on paper. So the pastel that Amy pointed out will actually be transferred and stored safely in our works on paper drawers over at the annex.
And we are pushing, maybe John will get mad for me to bring this up, but we are pushing to do another one of these at the annex. And I don't know whether or not the powers that be will let us, but I've actually never been to the annex and I would really like to go. So that's why I'm pushing. But so here is some new objects that just came in from a donor. I don't know what the protocol on that is, but okay. So we have a few objects here that are of varying strangeness, and we're going to start here with this object, which is what has been dubbed an electrical stimulation medical device, which was made by a company called E.J. Rose Manufacturing out of Los Angeles, California. And you know, all of these things that are here today just came in. None of the research has been done on them. There's very, very negligible information that's come in. And what I have found is a handful of lawsuits against this company and a few people referring to them as quacks. And this electrical stimulation device would have been a sort of at-home electroshock therapy thing. And you can see next to it this box of tools that sort of came with it. And you know, some people said they had something similar. They plugged it in and they could hear it working. I don't. This is another object in the museum that will never be plugged in again. And this is one of the few that impulse to plug it in and see what it looks like is not there at all. This is something that will only hurt you. And these items, you know, we try to stick to a sort of theme earlier and later of machines. So this electroshock therapy thing is paired right next to an early X-ray tube, and I don't understand the science or the physics or whatever the word is of X-ray, but that is a very early X-ray device, and it was made by the Friedlander Company, and I found a patent from 1907. I don't know if that's from 1907, but it's around then when these sorts of devices would have been used. There's a weird pair of pants here that does not require much of discussion. It's just a weird pair of pants. But in front of it is a medical vacuum tube from the Sorensen Company in New York. And what that object does is it actually sucks. It's a suction device for early surgery. So from the 1920s or so, it would literally, like, if you were getting like an awful turn of the century surgery, it would suck the blood or whatever sort of thing. You know, John doesn't like that. It's a suction device. That's what it is. No. So I don't know exactly how the suction device works, but we're gonna move on. So this next to it is a strange dental. You know, the dental drill of also early terror. You know, this is probably around the 1940s. It's called the Dumore Company. You can see the thing right there. And that's what the dentist was like, you know, 80 years ago. Did I do the math right? And actually something that hasn't changed, surgery or dentistry, hasn't changed much is optometry. And with this donation came a set that, go ahead, Amy. Okay. A set of lenses that probably would look familiar to anyone with glasses or contacts. And you know, optometry, we really kind of figured this out a long time ago, and most of it hasn't changed. You know, if you've gone to the optometrist, you sat there and gotten the better, worse, better, worse, better, worse. And this is a better, worse set of lenses from. Do we have a date on that
No,
one?
I don't even think we know the maker.
The date is not known. It's probably on the date is not known. So this is the kind of research that gets done once a set of objects comes in. And here we have something that's even more, well, it's not perplexing in one sense. It's obviously a prosthetic leg, but we don't know from when, from who, and from like what the purpose of this object. Not what the purpose. Of course we know what the purpose is. But what the nature of this object is. And Isabel, you wanted to speak to that for a second, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do, I wanted to address two things that are coming up in the chat. It's wonderful to have this live streamed. I'm hoping we can keep this for when we do on-site events again. But one is we do have a library, and that is included in the 200,000 objects. So today we're solely focusing on objects, but we do have a very robust and extremely large library. The other thing is these are, the Wolfsonian collection is from donations as well as purchases. So there's both. So back to the prosthetic and everything else on that table. We do a lot of research about provenance. So we want to make sure that what we have is ethically sourced and given to us, right, or purchased. So that's where a lot of the pre-accession research starts. If we're purchasing something, we do get as many details as we can from a dealer or the seller. We also do our own research as well to verify those details. But the bulk of the research, and that same goes for donation, but the bulk of the research that happens in terms of like verifying dates, verifying where it was made, who made it, that happens here. So our curatorial team will do research, especially if something's going on exhibition, if it's being lent out. But also we have a group of graduate assistants that we've employed over from the history department at FIU. We call them our metadata squad. And each year we get a fresh crop of them, and they do the research, that hard work of verifying, was something actually made in 1916 or 1917? Where was it made? And something like that prosthetic is an especially tricky one. I got a chance to look at it when I was in the building earlier last week, and there are no markings. We checked the shoes. There's a faint maker's mark at the bottom of the sole, which might be a clue, but the prosthetic itself is actually pretty devoid of marks. That would be a really tricky one. I'll hand it back to you, Nathaniel.
Okay, and yeah, that's part of the fun of being back here is these mysteries, and of course, solving them is one of the more satisfying professional things that I've done, and I'm sure Isabel and Amy and John can speak to that too. Some of the objects that come in, like this one here, are not particularly mysterious. This is a Black Flag sprayer, which would have been an at-home kind of just like a can of Raid that you would have. And Black Flag is, of course, a company that is still in existence. This thing would have sprayed like straight up DDT all over your house. And another chemical, which I forgot the name of, but was found to kill bald eagles, which I thought was particularly strange. But this object is not incredibly rare. You can find them for sale on eBay for not a terrible amount of money. But it does make us think about this time when spraying DDT all over your family was more accessible, I guess. But it also makes me think about bugs and what sorts of bugs we encounter here in the back of museums. And Isabel and I have both been to an interesting room. Will you want to speak to the bugs that you've seen in museum collections?
Sure. So we'll take a step back. Our storage facility, again, we're holding these objects in perpetuity. We do have an integrated pest management plan. And part of that plan is having glue traps or sticky traps strategically placed throughout our entire building, actually. There is a concentration of them here in the collection storage area. And what I do want to emphasize is this is, pretty normal and integrated pest management plan across museums. And it's it's not a preventative measure, it's a monitoring tool. So what we do is we check the traps about once a month, and we log any insects that we find in them. We log not only the amount, but the life stage if we can. So is it an egg? Is it, an adult? Where it was found. And then we make a note that the next time we check these traps, we need to look in that area. And the reason it's so valuable is because it helps us kind of understand, is an infestation about to happen? Has it happened? What can we do to keep an infestation from happening? And then what other tools can we use? We would, of course, talk to our conservator and our chief registrar. They are responsible primarily for the collections care and collections management, and then the appropriate measures would be taken to either prevent an infestation or deal with one. In terms of the craziest thing I've seen in one of these, so my background is in collections care. I was working at the National Park Service, and I actually found a snake in one of them, like a little baby garden snake. So that was kind of interesting. Being not in the middle of the Everglades, we don't get snakes in our sticky traps. And the bug sprayer, interestingly, is also a good point in time to talk about what we do with objects that could be potentially harmful, not only to the collection, but to staff. So if that bug sprayer did have an inherently very dangerous chemical in it, We would, of course, speak with our chief registrar and our conservator, Sylvia Manrique, to just see what can we do to make sure that, one, that gas doesn't leak out. Is there a way of removing it before getting it into the building? Are there specialists that do that? And then there are also objects that are dangerous later on in the long run. So as things off gas, sometimes they're dangerous. They produce chemicals that are flammable or chemicals that can really harm staff members. So what we've done with those things is we've also spoken to conservators, reached the proper avenues and then just seen what we can do. So for some that's freezing, for others it's proper enclosures and moving through there. And I think Nathaniel is waiting for us at one of the really cool features of this storage facility.
Hi, welcome back. Thank you, Isabel. I've been in that room in the Everglades at the, I believe it's called the Beard Center, and I have seen the piles of bugs that they get down there, and they're very diligent about it. It's a very well-run collection, but you can't keep bugs out of the Everglades. That's just nothing you can do about that. So anyway, coming back to this room, and I want to end on a note that I think is symbolic, much like the opening where we talked about that radio that represents the Wilsonian. We had spoken about machines and the kinds of things the machines happen in, and we went through, and I wanted to open some of these paintings and see if there were any machines. And we came to this panel here, which I just think is so beautiful for reasons that may only work for me. Up in the top left is a picture that perfectly symbolizes that kind of machine thought process that I was first going through. And it's a 1942, and it was painted for the Coca-Cola bottling company. And it shows coal being kind of shot down in the coal mine. You can see America at work here. And it was propaganda during the war, and it was made specifically for junior high school students, part of a series called Our America. And it would have come with, a kit that had a series of kind of workbooks and posters and wall charts, and there were it was coal and steel and lumber, and each one of them, signifying that America was working, but also it was fueled by Coca-Cola, of course. And Coca-Cola, one of the best advertisers, and even during the war, creating propaganda that seeped to the entire collective consciousness, and never really got any crap for it. They pretty much stayed above complaint. But just pairing that sort of machine of industry with the painting next to it, which shows the kind of the ruin of war. It's actually a painting by a German artist named Peter Duhlberg, who and it's called Ruins, and it was painted in 1945. So this is right next to each other. This beautiful war machine humming next to a city which is entirely broken and destroyed from the war machine paired next to it. And I just thought that this image of the two was, it wasn't purposeful. There's no curator here. There's no intention, because literally no one is meant to see these two things next to each other. They're stored there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy or Isabel, they're stored there because they fit there. And they came there in that moment together. But you have these two kind of very, very beautiful images right next to each other for no reason other than random. And below them, and come with me, if you will, for a minute. Below them is two images of women holding them up almost even. And this on the left is a Buffalo artist whose name is Evelyn Rumsey Carey, and she painted this in favor, of course, of women's suffrage in 1905. And it's got this kind of Art Nouveau vibe. It's almost biblical in nature with the halo, and she's becoming a tree. And it was made into a poster, which was propagated, quite heavily over the next 10, 15 years before women's suffrage actually happened. In my mind, and maybe this is a bit too out there for some people, she's holding up the top two pictures, and so is the woman next to her. Much like the women of collections, Amy and Isabel, are here and holding these places up, and really making sure that they function, that they keep themselves together, they keep safe, and they are the work that they do. As Isabel has said, for future generations is some of the more important work in a museum, and it rarely gets seen or celebrated or applauded. And that's what I wanted to do here today is applaud the people that work in these collections. Of course, Amy and Isabel and their colleagues in the Wolfsonian. John, who is camera shy this evening, but doing an amazing job of working the camera.
You haven't seen the footage.
But yeah, this is Into the Stacks. This is the kind of thing that we're going to continue to do with your enthusiasm if you keep logging on. And I really appreciate you guys coming along with me here tonight. Hopefully we didn't make any outrageous claims or anything. but that's that. Are there questions from the audience, or how is that looking, Oscar?
Daniel, Isabel, John, thank you so much for just this insider glimpse into the fourth floor. Yeah, we definitely have a range of questions, so I'll look to kind of video those here. And also appreciate everyone tuning in from the audience, just engaging, giving us some positive feedback and definite encouragement to continue this down the road. So let's see, looking at the list, we have a couple of questions from Kevin. Kevin, thanks for joining. Can we please see Hitler's toaster? Is the first question.
I don't know
an iconic object, but I'm not sure if it would be readily available.
I don't think it's not available, unfortunately. We could do with the Hitler as a kangaroo. We can do that maybe. There's plenty of Hitler in here. Trust me. That's the Wolfsonian is really good for that. What was Kevin's second question?
So following suit with that, has the scope of the collection expanded from purely propaganda-related artifacts to medical devices?
Has the scope of what? Say that one more time.
Has the scope of the collection expanded from purely propaganda-related artifacts to medical devices?
That's a question that I would love for Isabel to field if she feels comfortable with.
Sure. So I think at the very beginning, propaganda, and John can also hop in on this, propaganda arts was a cornerstone of the collection, but Mickey has always been interested in collecting more than that. And I think while it still remained a cornerstone, we've definitely expanded, especially since after the gift of his collection to the state of Florida, the collection did grow with other donations, other purchases. We do have an accessions committee. So we do review donations, we do review purchases that we can make. And there aren't only fielded in the arena of propaganda arts. We do have some medical devices, as you've seen. We do have a lot of decorative arts. So we're starting to range the gamut. I will say that we are right now, in terms of geographic origin, there is a lot of like American and European origins in our objects, but that is slowly becoming diverse as well. If that answers your question.
So we just got a question in from George. Is deaccessioning ever undertaken? Perhaps Isabel?
That's a great question. So deaccessioning in general in the museum field is quite controversial, especially if you have museums who at some point deaccession objects for monetary gain, right? We've seen some of that in the headlines, and that's a huge no-no. If we were to deaccession something, we would, of course, follow AAM protocols. We're accredited by them, and that's the American Alliance of Museums. I've only been here now about 4 or 5 years, and in my memory, I don't think we've deaccessioned anything. Whether for the history of the institution, I can't speak to that. That'd be something I'd have to look a little more into, but there is a time and a place for it within institutions, especially if, let's say it's something that is no longer stable and can't be repaired. Let's say it was damaged beyond repair, then you would seek proper protocols to either destroy it and move it from the collection. So that's one example of when deaccessioning is appropriate. Selling it off to make money for your collection is pretty much frowned upon by everyone in the in institutions.
I will say, Isabel, there have been a couple of instances I've heard during COVID in particular, where museums have sold off some works just to stay alive, and it's hard to blame a moment there where if it's for the survival of the entire museum to get rid of something that might be particularly valuable. I don't know, and John maybe probably knows better than anybody here if anything's been deaccessioned, but I do remember hearing a story of a toilet paper holder that was accidentally accessioned at one time, which I think was then deaccessioned afterwards. To speak to the nature of the Wolfsonian itself, that it's so eclectic and so far-ranging, and there's so many objects that at some point somebody accidentally accessioned a toilet paper holder that was literally just sitting there, that then had to be removed from the rolls, literally.
Yeah.
Hey, come on. The rolls is good.
No, I'm really glad you brought up the COVID situation. And I think also in those specific instances, AAM did speak out and say that wasn't something that would be like sanctionable, right? It was, they kind of understood and there was some leeway there because of the extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh, I keep seeing, Oscar, do you see this about a trunk?
I was about to mention, so I'm technically a relative newcomer to the Wolfsonian, and so something to mention is that we just opened to the public this past Thursday with limited visiting hours. We do encourage you all, if you are comfortable, we have visiting hours between Thursday and Sunday from 10 in the morning through 6 p.m. And so feel free to check out our website, book an appointment, and come see us. But and so I'm not fully aware of kind of that precedent, but perhaps Isabel, John, Nathaniel can illuminate us. So there seems to be word of a locked mystery travel trunk that we received a few years ago. Are there any insights to that? And if it was opened, what was inside?
Amy, I believe we did open it and it was empty.
Yes, I think it was a trunk belonging to an artist named Felix Topolsky. And it was a travel trunk indeed, but yes, it was empty when we finally were able to get a locksmith in to open it.
Wait, I don't know this story. So there was a trunk that ended up in the collection that was locked.
It was locked. It was gifted to us.
Oh, and there was nothing in it.
No, there was nothing in it.
Oh, that's a little...
Yeah, it was like Jimmy. Not Jimmy. Oh my gosh, who's safe?
Yeah.
Geraldo. Al Capone's safe, right?
That's right. Anything else, Oscar?
Yeah, we're still getting questions in. So yeah, again, anyone still tuned in, feel free to please send in your questions. So some people are actually inquiring about the Wolfsonian's sister institution, the Wolfsoniana in Genoa, Italy, and just the holdings over there. And so
did they follow that question up with when are you going to send Nathaniel to the Wolfsoniana? Because that's the question that I have as well. Because I have been hounding the powers that be here to send me for a long time. Apparently, there's a line that's ahead of me.
I'll volunteer.
Yeah, I'm not that important.
I volunteer.
They have a wonderful collection there too. What was the question? Is what's in that collection?
So what's in the Genoa collection? Correct.
Is it specifically Italian?
It's mostly Italian, and it's a similar theme. Again, it was Mr. Wilson's collection. So along the same theme for propaganda, decorative arts.
Yeah, but it mostly focuses on Italian objects. And I know that Sylvia, who's not here unfortunately, would have been best to speak of it because she's an expert in that collection. So if there are more questions about the nature of that exact collection, we can follow up with that person if they want to know. Yeah.
I also wanted to highlight, so our Chief Registrar, Kimberly Bergen, has been active in our comments and so helpful in fielding a lot of your questions. And I did want to highlight something that she mentioned, just circling back to deaccessioning, is that it's a very complicated process, which would require absolute transparency on behalf of the museum, but would also involve a special committee. It would need to be approved not only, so it's not like a unilateral decision by like one person, it's multiple people from different perspectives having that way in, which I think is an excellent thing. And then somebody else also mentioned Nathaniel's point about smaller institutions selling things off just to survive. And that's of course a very different situation.
And I just to speak to that, I've sat on collections committees before, and it's an incredible discussion, and there's always supposed to be someone from the top down, a member of the community, and I've sat on a committee in which those decisions are not taken lightly. But there are moments where deaccessioning does happen.
I see a question on temperature and humidity control. Do we have time to take that one, Oscar?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time.
So our storage facility is temperature and humidity controlled. We actually have, I don't think we've seen any in the shots, but we have quite a few data loggers that measure temperature and humidity here in storage, as well as in our exhibition spaces, in our offices, as well as on our first floor. And what you'll see there is, oh, there they go. It takes a reading every, I didn't notice. It takes a reading about every hour. And what's really great about these things is they actually, you can download this information and look at it as a spreadsheet. And what you're really looking for will vary in terms of dangers for some museums. So there is like an accepted range of humidity and temperature that's safe, but some museums, for instance, in the Southwest will struggle with arid temperatures and lack of humidity, whereas we in the South, especially South Florida, struggle with humidity. But the most important thing is to maintain a constant temperature and humidity. What you really want to avoid are large fluxes. And that's because you'll have objects, especially objects like our paintings, which are composite objects, which means they're made of many different materials, where it'll affect how these objects react to changes in temperature and can cause damage. But also because along with pests, mold is something you absolutely want to avoid. And we, along with monitoring, we also have a housekeeping plan to make sure that dust is kept track of and cleaned away, because that's also a great breeding ground for mold, since they find it really, really yummy.
So I've seen a couple of questions from Zulma. So asking about if the whole collection is in this specific site, and we do have a separate facility, which would be the annex. And so that's really where the bulk of the objects are kept. But she's also inquiring about temperature and humidity, and if there's a cold storage unit, perhaps?
We do have a cold storage for some objects I mentioned previously that were particularly unstable as they decompose. So I believe that was, I want to say they were celluloid photographs, and I think Kim could answer that. But as they decompose, they become increasingly more volatile and flammable, so they can actually combust if the temperature isn't right. So that's something that would go in cold storage.
Next, I'm seeing a question from John. What institutions typically borrow objects from the collection? Are there any institutions that come to mind? Amy?
That's a good one.
It's varied. It's everyone from university museums to the Metropolitan Museum, I believe, Museum of Modern Art, museums in Europe, the Reina Sofia in Madrid, the Stedelijk in Amsterdam. So we do it's usually a very robust loan program. Of course, it's slowed a little bit over the last couple months, but it's picking up again.
So there's not one kind of museum, it's many different kinds.
Oh, all different kinds.
And I think that speaks to like the strength of the collection. It's something that can lend itself to all sorts of interpretations and subject matter.
I guess a little following through with that idea, we have a question from Carl. What is the status of the museum expansion and showing more of the collection? So how will this be an experience that more people can have access to?
So in terms of access, along with our digital catalog, one thing that we did do, which is pretty interesting, is our shelf-aware digital interactive. So for the 6th floor, a Universe of Things exhibition, we did have multiple shelving units installed throughout the exhibition with objects from our collection. These objects themselves didn't have the wall labels that you see. So in order to access them, we developed an interactive, and I can drop that in the link in the chat for you all. And you can actually see what the objects are. And then it's basically a clickable map. You can click on it and it'll take you to the object record for our digital catalog. So you'll be able to see the information that we have. Just like you've seen here, a lot of our research is growing, it's being verified, it's a work in progress. So we do encourage you, if you see something on one of those shelves and you know what it is, or if you see an error, there is actually an email on the homepage of that interactive, and you can shoot us an email and tell us, hey, actually, it says 1936, but it's 37, or I do know what this is, in fact, and we would be eternally, eternally grateful. And I'll go ahead and do that while looks at more questions.
John, would you have any additional insight you could kind of share with us in terms of the expansion, just upcoming plans for the Wolf?
Well, we received approval from the voters of Miami Beach in the November election to go forward with our expansion that will add considerable space for us just to the north of the current building, and will enable us to show a lot more of the collection than we currently can. So it's exciting news for us.
So lots to look forward to. Yes, absolutely. Kevin, thanks so much for your questions. I'm seeing another one pop in. Do we consider the historic building a collection object itself? So the actual Wilsonian 1001 Washington Avenue as a collection object?
Of course. And the elevator included, of course. I think that the building is definitely a historic object. I don't know if it has designation or not. I think it must.
Yeah.
Okay, so it does, yeah.
I believe it does.
Then I think it's absolutely object, the most important object in and of itself by extension. And now that the museum itself is extended, I would just like to say that I'm a Miami Beach voter, and I voted for the extension. So, you're welcome. but yeah, the building is the most important object, I think.
And to clarify, it might not be an object in the traditional sense where Kim's just clarifying it doesn't have like an accession number, for instance, but in terms of like historic preservation, making sure that, it's something that we take care of, that in that case, and making sure it's for perpetuity, that makes sense. But no, it does not have like a number. She did mention, the Bridge Tender House does have a number,
There you go.
which is really interesting.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for keeping us honest up here, truly.
Well, I think we're getting a lot of questions just in terms of the inner structure of the museum, how these objects enter the collection, how they're looked after. But I think before wrapping up, I hope Nathaniel can kind of just share a little bit in how this project came about, Crypt Crackers, and how he's continued this work in other institutions as well. So maybe Nathaniel, you can kind of just share how this project kind of emerged and I guess a plan
Absolutely.
forward.
Traditionally, and I usually do this at the beginning, but a few years ago, the education coordinator at the time reached out to me and said, there's a book club here at the Wolfsonian, and they wanted to inject some life into the book club. And I said, listen, I have no interest in doing a book club, but I would like to do, what eventually became Into the Stacks, which was let's take these people and show them something that they've never seen before. These people, of course, is whoever wants access. Traditionally, the program has been on a Friday night. It starts in that cafe and it goes up. It comes upstairs, not into this room, but into a similar room that the public doesn't typically have access to. And we show them all these interesting objects. And that came from my work in a bunch of places here in Miami. And I've done what I like to call collections writing for years. I've been in several of the rooms like this of the museums in the city. Whichever one will have me, I'll go look at, try and find the stories that are there. I think that there's always interest in the art that is not on display, and you can get numbers from several different people, but one of the kind of industry accepted numbers is around 95% of the world's art is not currently on display. And I think now that hits even harder, that you can't go to the museum right now. So this work, I think, is important for museums and collections to be doing, to try and get outreach to people. Say, hey, look, this is what, everything's not on display. So look at what's there, and here's the interesting story. And all of those things, and most of those things that we've spoken about today, the chest that was unlocked and locked, we had to open it. I mean, that's all really interesting stuff. Each one of them, I mean, it may not take, a 45-minute television show, but each story in and of itself is interesting. And these are the kinds of things that I like to get out into the world, because I do think people engage with them. I think people find them fun. It's like, look at this weird leg. Let's try and figure out where the leg came from. And one of the things that I want to push coming up soon is Into the Stacks legs. I think that's a really funny idea. Let's find all the legs in the collection and see what it's about. And this is where you find these angles on the objects that are here and tell an interesting story. It takes an hour, which we're almost at, I believe. And people get to sit and learn something interesting and see something they've never seen before. And you really can't ask for much more from an hour,
Agreed.
I think we're right on schedule, Nathaniel. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to one more thing. Thank you to absolutely everyone that was involved tonight, and to all of the Into the Stacks. It's a very, very wonderful team, and everybody, I hate asking them to do things, but they never seem to complain too much.
Just behind your back.
Yeah, right, of course. In the emails that I don't see, that's right. But you get Freedom of Information Act. You better watch out. But so thank you so much, guys. You guys are all so wonderful. Of course, Oscar, Isabel, John, Amy, and Javaris, who wrote us up. Everybody's it's such a great place. I hope that when the doors open back up, you come back in, because everybody here wants to see you. Just wear your mask, all right? Be safe. Thank you so much.
On that note, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.